The dress hung in my closet like a dream made of silk and lace. I'd bought it 6 months before my wedding, saving every penny from my part-time job at the bookstore while finishing my master's degree. It wasn't designer, wasn't expensive by most standards, but to me, it was perfect. Ivory satin with delicate pearl beading along the bodice, a cathedral train that made me feel like I was floating when I tried it on. The saleswoman at Elena's Bridal had tears in her eyes when she zipped me up. "You look radiant, honey. Your fiancé is going to lose his breath." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus had proposed on a Tuesday in February, right there in our tiny apartment kitchen while I was making coffee. No fancy restaurant, no elaborate plan, just him dropping to one knee between the refrigerator and the breakfast table, holding a ring he'd saved for 8 months to buy. "Sophia, will you marry my awkward, nerdy self forever?" I said yes before he even finished the question. We'd been together since sophomore year of college, best friends who fell in love over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of opening our own architectural firm someday. The wedding was set for September 15th, a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens with just our closest friends and family. I should have known Mom would find a way to make it about her disappointment in me. The trouble started 3 weeks before the wedding, when Mom came over unannounced. She had a key, a privilege I was beginning to regret, and let herself in while Marcus was at work and I was putting together wedding favors at the kitchen table. Small sachets of lavender tied with cream ribbon. Simple, but elegant. I looked up to find her standing in the doorway with that expression I knew too well. The one that said she was about to deliver criticism disguised as concern. "Sophia, we need to discuss your wedding plans." She sat down uninvited, pushing aside my carefully arranged supplies. "Your father and I have been talking, and we're worried you're making a mistake." I kept tying ribbons, not trusting myself to look at her. "What kind of mistake, Mom?" "This whole wedding is too much. Too fancy for what it is." She picked up one of the sachets and examined it like evidence of my poor judgment. "You're not exactly bride material, sweetheart. I mean, look at you." I finally looked up. She was studying my face with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating livestock. My heart started that familiar racing it did whenever she began one of her assessments. Growing up, she'd done this constantly. Too tall, too bookish, too serious, not pretty enough, not social enough, not enough, period. What's that supposed to mean? You know what I mean. You've always been the practical one, not the princess type. This whole wedding is too much, too fancy for what it is. She picked up one of the sachets and examined it like evidence of my poor judgment. "You're not exactly bride material, sweetheart. I mean, look at you." I finally looked up. She was studying my face with the clinical detachment of someone evaluating livestock. My heart started that familiar racing it did whenever she began one of her assessments. Growing up, she'd done this constantly. Too tall, too bookish, too serious, not pretty enough, not social enough, not enough, period. What's that supposed to mean? You know what I mean. You've always been the practical one, not the princess type. This whole wedding is too much, too fancy for what it is. I stood up, my hands shaking slightly. "I think you should leave. I'm trying to help you, Sophia, before you embarrass yourself in front of everyone we know. Some women are meant to be brides, and some women are meant to be wives. There's a difference. Get out." She stood slowly, smoothing her skirt with deliberate calm. "I'm your mother. I love you enough to tell you the truth even when it hurts. That dress hanging in your closet, it's beautiful, but it's not meant for someone like you. Save yourself the heartbreak of pretending otherwise." After she left, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by half-finished wedding favors and cried. Not the gentle tears of stress or overwhelm, but the deep, painful sobs of someone whose deepest insecurities had just been weaponized against them.
I'd spent years building confidence, learning to see myself as worthy of love and happiness, but 20 minutes with my mother had cracked that foundation. When Marcus came home that evening, he found me still at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. "Hey, what's wrong? You look like someone died." I told him everything. Every cruel word, every implication, every carefully placed barb designed to make me doubt myself. She said what about the dress? That it's not meant for someone like me, that I'm not bride material. Marcus knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his. "Sophia, look at me. Your mother is wrong about everything. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, inside and out. That dress was made for you, and you're going to be the most stunning bride in the history of weddings." But what if she's right? What if I'm just playing pretend? Then we're both playing pretend, because I'm pretending to be worthy of marrying someone as incredible as you. That night, Marcus held me while I cried out 3 weeks of wedding stress and a lifetime of maternal criticism. By morning, I felt stronger, more determined. Mom was wrong. I deserved my fairy tale wedding just as much as anyone else. I should have known she wouldn't give up that easily. The next Friday, exactly 2 weeks before the wedding, I came home from my final dress fitting to find smoke in the air and my mother standing in my backyard next to our fire pit. Something white and charred was burning in the flames, sending ash floating across the lawn like snow. It took me a moment to recognize the pearl beading scattered in the grass around her feet. My wedding dress. She was burning my wedding dress. "Mom, what are you doing?" The words came out strangled, barely recognizable as my own voice. She turned to face me with that same clinical expression, as if she were simply taking out trash instead of destroying the most important piece of clothing I'd ever owned. "I'm saving you from yourself, sweetheart. This fantasy has gone far enough." I ran to the fire, trying to grab what was left, but there was nothing to save. 6 months of savings, hours of fittings, dreams of walking down the aisle feeling beautiful, all reduced to smoke and ash. The pearl beading had melted, leaving strange, twisted shapes in the dirt. "You burned my dress." I couldn't believe I was saying the words. "You actually burned my wedding dress." I did what any loving mother would do. I protected my daughter from making a fool of herself. She brushed ash off her hands with casual indifference. Ugly girls don't deserve white, Sophia. That's just the truth.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Better you learn it now than standing at the altar in something that was never meant for you. The words hit me like physical blows. Ugly girls don't deserve white. As if purity, beauty, and worthiness were finite resources that had to be rationed, and I hadn't qualified for my share. I stared at the smoldering remains of my dress, feeling something inside me shift and harden. This wasn't criticism disguised as concern. This wasn't tough love or maternal wisdom. This was cruelty. Pure and deliberate, designed to break me down completely. "Get out of my house." "Sophia, don't be dramatic. We can find you something more appropriate. A nice pantsuit, maybe. Something that actually fits who you are. Get out of my house." She left, but not before saying one final thing that would haunt me for days. "You'll thank me for this someday, when you're not the laughingstock of your own wedding." I stood alone in my backyard, surrounded by the ashes of my dreams, 2 weeks before my wedding, with no dress and no idea how to fix what felt completely unfixable. But as I stared at those twisted pearls in the grass, I made a decision that would change everything. She wanted to destroy my fairy tale. Instead, she was about to discover what happens when you underestimate a woman who's finally learned her own worth. Marcus found me sitting on the back porch at midnight, still staring at the cold ashes in the fire pit. I hadn't moved in hours, couldn't process what had actually happened. He took one look at my face, then at the scattered pearls glinting in the moonlight, and understood everything without me saying a word. She burned it. His voice was so quiet, I almost didn't hear him. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. If I started talking, I might start screaming, and I wasn't sure I'd ever stop. Marcus sat beside me on the porch steps, pulling me against his chest. We'll figure this out. There has to be something we can do. With what money? The wedding's in 2 weeks. Every bridal shop I called today is booked solid, and even if they weren't, we spent everything on the first dress. The flowers, the photographer, the venue. It's all paid for, but there's nothing left for another dress. I'd spent the afternoon on the phone, growing more desperate with each call. David's bridal had one dress in my size, a polyester nightmare that looked like a tablecloth. The higher-end boutiques laughed when I asked about rush orders. Elena's bridal, where I'd bought my original dress, offered to let me rent a sample gown that had been tried on by hundreds of other women, for nearly as much as I'd spent on my ruined dress. What about borrowing something? From who? My cousin Rachel is a size 4. My friend Emma eloped in Vegas, and your sister lives in Oregon. There's no one, Marcus. Mom knew exactly what she was doing. The full weight of her calculated cruelty was becoming clear. She'd waited until it was too late to replace the dress easily, too late to cancel the wedding without losing deposits, too late to do anything but scramble and panic exactly the way I was doing now. Marcus was quiet for a long time, then pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Something I probably should have done years ago. He scrolled through his contacts and hit call. I could hear it ringing on speaker, then a woman's voice answered. "Marcus, honey, it's almost 1 a.m. Is everything okay?" "Hi, Mom. No, everything's not okay. I need to tell you what Sophia's mother did today, and then I need your help." I'd always loved Marcus's mother, Linda, but we'd never been particularly close. She lived 3 hours away, worked as a fashion merchandiser for a department store chain, and had always been politely supportive of our relationship without getting overly involved. Now Marcus told her everything, his voice getting harder with each detail. She burned Sophia's wedding dress in their backyard 2 weeks before the wedding. Told her ugly girls don't deserve white. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then Linda's voice came back, sharp with anger I'd never heard from her before. "That woman burned my future daughter-in-law's wedding dress? Completely destroyed. There's nothing left but ashes." And she said, "What about Sophia not deserving white?" Marcus repeated the words and I heard Linda take a sharp breath. "Put Sophia on the phone." Marcus handed me his phone, and I held it like it might bite me. "Hi, Linda." "Sophia, sweetheart, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What that woman did was not just cruel, it was unforgivable. But we're going to fix this. Do you understand me? We're going to make sure you have the most beautiful wedding dress anyone has ever seen." "Linda, I appreciate that, but there's no time and no money and—" "Honey, stop. I've worked in fashion for 25 years. I know people. More importantly, I know people who know people. Can you take Monday off work?" "I guess, but..." "Good. I'm driving down Sunday night, and Monday morning we're going shopping. Not at some chain store, not at some rental place. I'm taking you to see someone who's going to create magic for you." After Linda hung up, Marcus and I sat in the dark talking until sunrise. About his mother's confidence, about my mother's poison, and about how we were going to get through the next 2 weeks without me having a complete breakdown. By morning, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could salvage this. Linda arrived Sunday evening with a trunk full of fabric samples, fashion magazines, and a determination that could have moved mountains. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, then held me at arm's length and studied my face with the intensity of a general planning battle strategy. "Your mother is a miserable woman who tried to steal your joy because she doesn't have any of her own. But we're not going to let her win. Tomorrow, I'm taking you to meet someone very special." Monday morning, Linda drove me across town to a neighborhood I'd never been to before, full of converted warehouses and art studios. We pulled up in front of a building with no sign, just a number painted in elegant script on a heavy wooden door. "This is it?" "This is it.
Sophia, meet me properly introduce you to Elena Rodriguez. She's the most talented designer I've ever worked with, and she's going to save your wedding. The woman who opened the door looked like she belonged in a fashion magazine herself. Tall and elegant, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a sleek bun, and the kind of posture that suggested years of dance training. She embraced Linda like an old friend, then turned to study me with eyes that seemed to see everything. "So you're the bride whose mother burned her dress." I blinked in surprise. "Linda told you?" "Linda told me everything. That woman should be ashamed of herself, speaking to you that way. But let me tell you something, mija. I've been designing wedding gowns for 15 years, and I can tell within 5 minutes of meeting a woman exactly what kind of bride she's meant to be. You want to know what I see when I look at you?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I see strength. I see grace. I see a woman who's been told her whole life she's not enough, but who's learned to love herself anyway. I see someone who deserves to feel like a goddess on her wedding day."
And I see someone whose mother is about to discover she messed with the wrong woman. Elena led us into her studio, and I gasped. The space was filled with the most beautiful gowns I'd ever seen, each one clearly custom-made, each one a work of art. Silk and satin caught the light, streaming through tall windows. Lace, delicate as spiderwebs, adorned mannequins. Beadwork that looked like it belonged in a museum covered bodices and trains. "Elena, we only have 2 weeks," Linda said apologetically. "I know it's impossible, but..." "Nothing is impossible. Difficult, yes. Expensive, yes. But impossible? Never." Elena circled me slowly, making mental notes. "What's your budget, realistically?" My heart sank. "Honestly, maybe $300. We spent everything on the first dress." Elena and Linda exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. "Sophia, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. If money weren't an issue, if you could have any dress in the world, what would it look like?" I closed my eyes, picturing the dress I'd always imagined since I was little. Something that makes me feel powerful, not delicate or fragile, but strong and confident. Maybe with sleeves, because I've always been self-conscious about my arms. Beautiful detailing, but not overly fussy. Classic, but with something unexpected. A dress that says, I know exactly who I am and I'm not apologizing for it. When I opened my eyes, Elena was smiling. "Perfect. I know exactly what you need. And I know exactly how we're going to make your mother regret ever laying a finger on your original dress." She pulled out her phone and made a call in rapid Spanish, then another in English, then a third in what sounded like French. Within an hour, her studio was bustling with activity. Seamstresses arrived with bags of supplies, a beadwork specialist showed up with cases full of crystals and pearls. Someone delivered boxes of the most exquisite lace I'd ever seen. "Elena, what's all this? I told you I can only afford..." She held up a hand to stop me. "Mija, let me tell you a story. 5 years ago, my own daughter got married. Beautiful girl, successful career, marrying a wonderful man. But her future mother-in-law decided she wasn't good enough for her precious son. Told her she looked like a peasant in her engagement photos, suggested she might want to lose weight before the wedding, made her cry every time they were in the same room." Elena's hands moved as she spoke, pulling fabrics and sketching designs with swift, sure strokes. "I made my daughter the most spectacular wedding dress anyone in our family had ever seen. French lace from Lyon, silk from Milan, beadwork that took 3 artisans 2 months to complete. She looked like a queen, but more importantly, she felt like one. And when her new mother-in-law saw her walking down that aisle, she knew she'd underestimated the wrong woman." She looked up from her sketching to meet my eyes. "Some dresses are just dresses, Sophia. But some dresses are statements. Some dresses are declarations of war. Your mother thinks she can break you down with her cruelty? We're going to show her exactly what happens when she tries to dim someone else's light." Linda squeezed my hand. The dress is my wedding gift to you. Elena and I have been friends for years, and we've been waiting for the right project to collaborate on. Consider this our masterpiece." I started crying then, overwhelmed by their kindness, by the sudden shift from despair to hope, by the realization that sometimes family isn't who shares your blood, but who shows up when you need them most. Elena handed me a tissue and patted my shoulder gently. "No tears on the fabric, mija. We have work to do, and your wedding is going to be unforgettable." The next 10 days passed in a whirlwind of fittings, late-night sewing sessions, and magic happening right before my eyes. Elena's studio became my second home, and I watched in amazement as she and her team created something beyond my wildest dreams. The dress took shape layer by layer, each detail more breathtaking than the last. The base was silk mikado in the softest ivory, structured enough to give me the confidence Elena promised, but flowing enough to move like water when I walked. The sleeves were 3/4 length, made from French Alençon lace, so delicate it looked like it had been woven by fairies. The bodice featured hand-sewn crystals in a pattern that caught light from every angle, creating an almost ethereal glow. But the back was Elena's masterpiece. A deep V neckline plunged to just above my waist, framed by the same intricate lace as the sleeves, with tiny pearl buttons trailing down the length of the train. It was sophisticated, unexpected, and absolutely stunning. When I tried it on for the final fitting, the seamstresses actually applauded. "Mija, you look like you could rule the world in that dress," Elena said, adjusting the train one final time. "Your mother is going to take one look at you and realize she created a monster she can't control." I stared at myself in the three-way mirror, hardly recognizing the confident woman looking back. This wasn't the girl who used to hide in oversized sweaters and avoid mirrors. This was someone who knew her worth, someone who commanded attention without apology. Linda wiped away tears as she helped me step out of the dress for the last time before the wedding. Marcus isn't going to know what hit him. Hell, I don't think anyone at that wedding is going to know what hit them. The night before my wedding, I got a text from Mom. "I heard you found another dress. I hope it's more appropriate than the last one. See you tomorrow." No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done, just criticism disguised as maternal concern. I showed the text to Marcus, who was staying at his parents' house to maintain tradition. "Are you okay?" he asked over the phone. "I'm perfect. Tomorrow, she's going to see exactly who she tried to destroy, and it's going to be beautiful." Wedding morning dawned crisp and clear. September 15th arrived with golden sunshine and the kind of perfect weather that makes you believe in fairy tales. Linda arrived early to help me get ready, bringing a team of hair and makeup artists Elena had recommended. As they worked their magic, transforming me into a version of myself I'd never seen before, I felt a calm confidence settling over me. The photographer Marcus and I had hired, David, arrived to capture getting ready shots and stopped dead when he saw me. "Holy hell, Sophia. I've been shooting weddings for 8 years, and I have never seen a bride look more radiant. This is going to be the cover of my portfolio." Linda helped me into the dress one final time, fastening each tiny pearl button with careful precision. When she finished and stepped back, both she and David were silent for a long moment. "What?" I asked, suddenly nervous. "Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Linda whispered. "Everything is perfect. You're perfect." David started shooting, capturing the moment from every angle. "Sophia, I need you to walk to the window. Now turn back towards me. Perfect. Hold that pose. The light is incredible on that beadwork." As I moved through the poses, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Power.
Not arrogance or vanity, but a deep, unshakable knowledge of my own worth. Mom had tried to convince me I was undeserving of beauty, of celebration, of love. But standing there in Elena's masterpiece, I knew the truth. I deserved all of it and more. The ceremony was at Millfield Botanical Gardens, in a glass conservatory surrounded by orchids and trailing vines. Marcus and I had chosen the venue because it felt like a secret garden, intimate and magical. As guests began arriving, I watched from the bridal suite window, looking for Mom's car.
She arrived exactly on time, wearing a navy dress I'd never seen before and the pinched expression she reserved for events she didn't approve of. Dad helped her out of the car, and they made their way toward the conservatory with the enthusiasm of people attending a funeral. "She looks miserable," Linda observed, peering over my shoulder. "Good. She earned it." The music started, and it was time. Linda gave me one final hug before taking her seat, whispering, "Go show them who you are, sweetheart." I waited in the glass corridor outside the conservatory, heart pounding with anticipation rather than nerves. Through the windows, I could see our guests turning in their seats, Marcus standing at the altar with his best man, the officiant smiling expectantly. This was it. This was my moment. The doors opened, and I stepped into the conservatory. The collective gasp from our guests was audible, followed by a moment of absolute silence. Then David started shooting rapidly, capturing expressions I would treasure forever. Marcus's best man actually grabbed Marcus's arm to steady him, his face showing pure awe. But it was Marcus's expression that made my heart soar. He looked like he was seeing sunshine for the first time, like he couldn't quite believe I was real and walking toward him. His eyes filled with tears, and he pressed his hand to his heart in a gesture so genuine that several guests started crying. I walked slowly down the aisle, savoring every step. Elena had been right about the dress making me feel powerful. Every eye was on me, but instead of shrinking under the attention, I embraced it. This was my day, my celebration, my declaration that I was worthy of every beautiful thing life had to offer. As I passed the rows of seats, I heard whispered comments. "She looks absolutely stunning. That dress is incredible. I've never seen Sophia look more beautiful." But the reaction I was waiting for came when I reached the third row. Mom's face had gone completely white. She stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between shock and what looked almost like fear. Dad leaned over to whisper something to her, but she didn't respond, couldn't take her eyes off me. For the first time in my life, my mother was speechless. I reached the altar, and Marcus stepped forward to take my hand. "You're the most beautiful woman who ever lived," he whispered, just loud enough for the front rows to hear. "I'm the luckiest man on earth." The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and rings and joy. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife and Marcus kissed me, the conservatory erupted in applause and cheers. We walked back down the aisle together, married, triumphant, glowing with happiness. During the cocktail hour, guest after guest approached to compliment my dress, my appearance, the ceremony. Elena had insisted on attending as Linda's guest, and she beamed with pride every time someone asked about the designer. "That's Elena Rodriguez. She's a true artist," Linda would say. But Mom stayed conspicuously absent from the receiving line. I spotted her standing alone by the orchid display, looking lost and uncomfortable. Several family members had tried to engage her in conversation, but she seemed unable to focus on anything but stealing glances at me. Finally, during dinner, she approached our table. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table as she walked over, her expression unreadable. "Sophia," she stood awkwardly beside my chair, clearly struggling for words. "You look... the dress is... I didn't expect..." "Didn't expect what, Mom?" She glanced around nervously, aware that nearby tables were listening. "You look beautiful. Really beautiful. I just wanted to say that." It wasn't an apology, wasn't an acknowledgement of what she'd done, but it was the closest thing to admitting she'd been wrong that I'd ever heard from her. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who had tried so hard to make me small, who had literally burned my dreams to ash because she couldn't bear to see me shine. I said thank you, simply. "Elena Rodriguez designed it. She's incredibly talented. Maybe you should tell her how much you like it." Mom's face flushed as she realized I was directing her toward the woman who had created the dress that proved everything she'd said about me was wrong. She mumbled something about needing to find Dad and hurried away. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table and kissed my cheek. How does it feel to be right about everything? I watched Mom retreat across the reception hall,
looking smaller somehow than she had that day in my backyard. It feels like freedom.
She has a gift for making women feel powerful. Yes, I can see that. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Those beads must have taken forever to sew by hand. Mom traced the edge of one photo with her finger. I've never seen you look so radiant. It was the closest she'd ever come to admitting that maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about what I was capable of becoming. The real change became apparent over the following months. Mom stopped making comments about my appearance, my weight, my clothing choices. She stopped suggesting I needed to be more realistic about my place in the world. Most shocking of all, she started asking about my work, my goals, my opinions on things she'd never shown interest in before. "I've been thinking about what happened before your wedding," she said one afternoon in December, nearly 3 months after we'd returned from Italy. We were having coffee in my kitchen, the same room where she'd delivered so many casual cruelties over the years. "I think I owe you an apology." I nearly choked on my coffee. In 25 years, I'd never heard my mother apologize for anything. "You think?" She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "What I did to your dress, what I said to you, it was wrong. I was trying to protect you from disappointment, but I realize now that I was the one creating disappointment." "Mom, you didn't just disappoint me. You tried to sabotage the most important day of my life because you couldn't stand the thought of me feeling beautiful." The words hung between us, honest and sharp. I'd never spoken to her so directly before, never called her behavior what it actually was. But something about wearing Elena's dress, about feeling truly confident for the first time in my life, had given me permission to stop managing her feelings at the expense of my own truth. "I know," she said quietly. "I know that's what I did. And I know saying sorry doesn't fix it, but Sophia, seeing you at that wedding, seeing how wrong I was about everything, it made me realize I've been a terrible mother." "Not terrible," I said, surprised to find myself meaning it. "Scared, maybe, controlling, but not terrible." "I was jealous," she admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "My whole life, I've felt ordinary, unremarkable. When you were growing up so smart and accomplished, I think I was afraid you'd realize you were better than me and leave me behind. So I tried to keep you small, keep you needing me." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had, and also the most painful. Understanding her motivations didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained so much about the constant criticism, the subtle undermining, the way she'd made my achievements feel like personal threats to her identity. "The irony is that trying to keep me small almost did make me leave you behind," I said. "If Marcus's mother hadn't stepped in, if Elena hadn't created that dress, I might have gone through the wedding wearing something that made me feel as inadequate as you wanted me to feel, and I never would have forgiven you for that." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "Linda is a remarkable woman, and Elena, she's an artist. That dress they made for you, it wasn't just beautiful. It was like armor. It protected you from all the poison I'd poured into your head over the years." Over the following year, our relationship slowly rebuilt itself on healthier foundations. Mom started treating me like an adult whose opinions mattered, asking for advice instead of offering unsolicited criticism. She began talking about her own insecurities, her regrets, the ways her own mother had made her feel small, and how she'd unconsciously passed that legacy on to me. It wasn't a complete transformation. She still had moments of falling back into old patterns, still occasionally made comments that revealed the depth of her own self-doubt, but the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. I was no longer the daughter who needed to be kept in line, and she was no longer the mother who felt threatened by my success. The most surprising development came 18 months after the wedding, when Mom asked me to go shopping with her for a dress for my cousin's wedding. We spent the afternoon trying on clothes together, and I watched her discover that she, too, could look elegant and confident when she chose clothes that made her feel good, instead of clothes that helped her blend into the background. "I think I understand now why that dress was so important to you," she said as we left the boutique, both carrying bags with new purchases. "I've spent so many years trying to be invisible.
I forgot what it felt like to want to be seen. That evening, I called Elena to tell her about the shopping trip. She laughed with delight when I described Mom trying on an emerald green wrap dress that made her look 10 years younger and absolutely luminous. Mija, you know what this means. It means you didn't just save your own wedding day when you walked down that aisle. You saved your relationship with your mother. Sometimes when we show people who we really are, it gives them permission to discover who they really are too. Elena had become more than just the designer who saved my wedding. She'd become a mentor, a friend, someone who understood the transformative power of feeling truly beautiful. We met for lunch regularly, and she often shared stories of other brides whose families had tried to dim their light, women who'd found their strength through the simple act of wearing something that made them feel powerful. Every dress tells a story, she told me during one of our lunches. But the best stories are the ones where the bride discovers she was never the supporting character in her own life. She was always the heroine. She just needed the right dress to remember. 2 years after the wedding, Marcus and I bought our first house. As we were packing up the apartment, I found the box where I'd stored my wedding dress, professionally cleaned and preserved. Elena had insisted on the preservation service as part of her gift, saying that someday I might want to pass the dress on or simply look at it and remember who I'd become. I pulled the dress out of its tissue paper wrapping and held it up to the lit. Even in storage, it was breathtaking. The beadwork caught the afternoon sun streaming through our bedroom window, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls. But more than its beauty, I remembered the feeling of wearing it, the confidence it had given me, the way it had announced to the world that I knew my worth. "What are you smiling about?" Marcus asked, finding me sitting on our bed with the dress spread across my lap. "I'm thinking about the woman who wore this dress. How different she was from the woman who watched her mother burn her original dress in the backyard. Same woman, just one who finally had the right armor to face the battle." We moved the dress to our new house, hanging it in the back of our walk-in closet, where I could see it every morning when I got dressed. A daily reminder that I was worthy of beautiful things, worthy of celebration, worthy of taking up space in the world without apology. 5 years after the wedding, Marcus and I was promoted to senior architect at my firm, finally achieving the dream Marcus and I shared since college. The celebration dinner was at an upscale restaurant downtown, and I wore a black cocktail dress that made me feel as confident as Elena's wedding gown. Mom was there, beaming with pride as she told anyone who would listen about my promotion. She told our waiter, "I always knew Sophia would be successful," conveniently forgetting the years she'd spent trying to convince me to aim lower, dream smaller, expect less. But I didn't correct her. People change, and sometimes they need to rewrite their own stories to live with the people they used to be. After dinner, as Marcus and I walked to our car through the city streets, I thought about the journey from that devastating night in my backyard to this moment of professional triumph. The dress had been the catalyst, but the real transformation had been internal, learning to see myself as worthy of respect, success, and unconditional love. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your mom hadn't brun the dress?" Marcus asked, as we drove home through neighborhoods full of twinkling lights. I think about it sometimes. Maybe I would have had a beautiful wedding and gone back to accepting her treatment as normal. Maybe it took something that extreme to wake me up to how much I'd been diminishing myself to make her comfortable. So, in a weird way, burning the dress was the best thing she ever did for you? I considered this as we pulled into our driveway, looking up at the house that we'd filled with art, books, and dreams made real. Not the burning. The burning was cruel and destructive. But Elena creating the replacement dress, your mother stepping in to help, me finally standing up for myself, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. It taught me that sometimes when people try to destroy your dreams, the universe responds by giving you something even better than what you originally imagined.